Hello, greetings from Dallas, and welcome to our LSU Sports Insider podcast brought to you by The Advocate, theadvocate.com, the Times-Picayune, and NOLA.com. I'm sports columnist Scott Rabalais, joined here today by the other members of our Advocate Dallas Bureau, Koki Riley, our LSU baseball and football beat writer, and Reed Darcey, our utility infielder. He covers football, women's basketball. We can throw him on gymnastics, whatever. Guys, great to be with you today.
Doing pretty well. Reed, do you know what a utility infielder is?
Yes, I know what a utility infielder is. I can play every spot. I'm more of a middle infielder, I think, but you put me wherever, I'm good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that we didn't take you out of your comfort zone there, Reed. We're coming to you during a halftime break on the final day of SEC Media Days. The last four teams on the schedule: Arkansas, Texas A&M, Auburn, and Kentucky. Reed, it's a little strange because the SEC expanded their schedule format. Is still a temporary schedule format for this year with the expansion of the league. It's strange that LSU isn't playing Auburn this season for the first time since 1991. And as we record this, we've heard from two coaches so far today who are in very different places. I was frankly surprised that Arkansas coach Sam Pittman wasn't fired after going 4-8 and 1-7 last year in the SEC. I don't think any coach's seat is hotter in the conference this year than his. Then we had Mike Elko, who took over at A&M from the guy who was on the biggest hot seat last year. That was Jimbo Fisher. He's trying to make the Aggies relevant again in this newly expanded 16-team SEC. Your thoughts on what we heard from both coaches this morning?
Yeah, I thought the most interesting stuff we heard today was from Sam Pittman. I think he gave some good answers. He was sort of asked directly about his job status and his job security and where he sort of thinks he fits in, in the hierarchy of SEC coaches. And he didn't really shy away from that. He sort of said, yeah, like I know I'm on the hot seat. I know I need to turn things around. I know that, say we need to improve the offensive line. I need to recruit better on the offensive line. And I thought he gave a really good answer just, about how he's looking to improve the program and where he thinks he's fallen short in the last couple of years to get Arkansas where it is today and to get him where he is today. And so I think he's well aware of the fact that he needs to turn things around, and Arkansas needs to have a good season. He needs to finish probably above 500 if he wants to be back at Media Days next year. So I think Sam Pittman, he was really honest. He was really refreshingly honest, I think, and he didn't shy away from any of that. So that was my main takeaway from this morning. That was the main thing that I took away.
Yeah, Mike Elko, of course, is trying to get Texas A&M into the championship game for the first time. That they've never been there since the time since they joined the league, and they're trying to obviously stay up there relevant with their longtime rival Texas, who's now coming into the league, and frankly, taking a lot of their thunder, going into this season. As you can expect, there's a lot of excitement with Texas and OU coming in. It seems like longer than 3 days ago, but Monday, LSU opened SEC Media Days with Coach Brian Kelly here in Dallas and his three players, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, tight end Mason Taylor, and linebacker Harold Perkins. I was surprised, and I think a lot of us covering LSU were surprised that Harold Perkins was asked to come here because we hadn't spoken to him since after the Missouri game last October. But I thought he did okay, and I hope we get to hear from him more during the season. Koki, there's a lot of pressure on Perkins this year to play better than in 2023. He's moving back to the inside linebacker position where he started last season and honestly looked lost at times. He said it's going to be different this time for him at inside linebacker, but it's really on him to be that disruptive force he was as a freshman in 2022 and help LSU to be at least decent on defense after an abysmal 2023. What do you think? Are you buying this new old position for Perkins and that the Tigers can be markedly improved on defense this year, enough to make LSU a college football playoff contender?
Yeah, I still have a healthy amount of skepticism as to how this is going to work out with Perkins at middle linebacker. I wouldn't say it's to the point where I don't think it's I don't think it's definitely not going to work. But I also, I side on the caution of pessimism here, and that's just because middle linebacker, that's such a tough position, especially mentally. And I think that's sort of a position where you really need to understand what opposing offenses are doing to you. You really need to understand how to how to shed blocks, and that takes a big physical toll. And that middle linebacker spot's also a really big leadership spot. He's going to be asked a lot this season, and it's going to be a pretty big transition for him. And I don't think this is just because of the quote unquote failed experiment from last season. I think it's a lot of my opinion with this has to do with the fact that position is just a very hard position. It's a very demanding position, and it's going to take more than a fall camp and the last 2 years of playing there to really master that position. So I still think they should move him around a decent bit while maybe, keeping him in that middle linebacker spot. I think the fact that he's added weight up to 220 pounds, I think that will help him a little bit and shed some of those.
He said he's at 225 right now.
25, so, 225. Thank you. That'll help him shed some of these blocks. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this experiment works this time around. I think they're in a much better position to have it work this time than last time. And I think having Greg Penn next to him is going to be a benefit. Greg Penn, he's solid. He's a solid player. He's a smart, heady player. But I think also at the same time, it's just he's going to be asked to do a lot, and it's going to take time for him to really get used to it. And that's not even including the physical aspect, which, again, we've mentioned that he's improved at. But, 225 is still a little bit light for that spot.
I'm with you, Koki. I think it still remains to be seen whether this is going to work out like they said. He seems like more of a natural guy coming off the edge, but they've got to try some things. They've got to try to improve after being just ranking near the bottom or pretty much at the bottom at a lot of national defensive rankings last year. You got to try to shake things up and do some new things. The offense obviously looks really solid again. I know they lost Jaden Daniels and some great receivers and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, but I'm expecting them to be number one in the country in total in scoring offense again, but I expect them to be pretty potent with Garrett Nussmeier as the quarterback. Reed, you focused Monday on what Garrett had to say. Though he played well against Wisconsin back on New Year's Day in the ReliaQuest Bowl, we still don't have a large sample size of him as a starter. That said, he sounds the part. He sounds confident. He sounds ready to lead this team. What were your impressions of him here in Dallas on Monday?
My impression was that he's ready, and he looks ready and he sounds ready. And it makes sense that he is, because he's sort of been building toward this for a long time. Not just the last 3 years at LSU, but before that, throughout, his middle school years, his high school years. It's easy to forget. His dad's a football coach, and his dad sort of let him tag along with him, on the sidelines of NFL games, of college games. I think it was interesting. Garrett Nussmeier, he said earlier in the week that one of his earliest memories is sort of being on the sidelines at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Alabama, and just being with his dad when he was the OC at Alabama. And he sort of said that because I've been in that environment before, because I was in that environment at such a young age, those kind of environments in the SEC don't really faze me as much as they would for a first-time starting quarterback. And so definitely you can see that he's a coach's son when he talks. You can see it come through his voice and in the things that he's saying. And I think you can see the sort of work that he's put in over his entire life to sort of get to this moment right here, which is being the starting quarterback at LSU. And he also touched on exactly what being the starting quarterback at LSU means to him. He's moved around a whole lot in his life, obviously being the son of a football coach, but he still thinks that his home and that his roots are in Louisiana. He was born in Lake Charles. That's where he considers home. He's lived in a bunch of different places throughout his life, but that's sort of where he grounds himself. And he's here now. He's at LSU. He's going to be the starting quarterback. The job is his. He doesn't have to earn it. He's already earned it. He doesn't have to compete for it. And I think it'll be interesting to see how he looks and how the offense sort of looks different with him instead of Jaden Daniels. But the main takeaway was that he's ready for this moment, because it's been building for some time, and he's been working for it for quite a while now. And that was sort of what we tried to angle the story towards on Monday.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Matt Flynn back in 2007, waited behind Jamarcus Russell, who was the number one draft pick that year with the then Oakland Raiders, waited for his turn. Finally, as a senior, he got to be the starting quarterback, and of course led LSU to a national championship. Quarterbacks we're not usually that loyal. They're not usually that patient anymore. And Garrett spoke with us, I think, back in the spring, right when we talked to him. He talked about that. He could have moved, and then no one would have thought much about it because that's what quarterbacks do a lot. But as you said, this is home for him, and that had to be a big factor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Koki. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Reed. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think we said this last week. He could have transferred. He had multiple opportunities to, and no one would have blamed him if he did. It's sort of become the norm now in college football. But he stuck around. He stayed in the system, even as LSU cycled through 2 head coaches, 3 different play callers. He sort of stuck around. And I think now, I'm happy to see that it's paying off for him and that he gets to start after waiting all this time. There's been a few quarterbacks coming through here at media days who've taken that route, and it's been interesting to see how they've been asked about it, what their thought process went on behind the scenes, trying to decide whether they should transfer or not. So go ahead, Koki. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, with Garrett Nussmeier, I think it's really huge that they were able to bring him back. And in terms of bringing in a first-year starter at quarterback, it's the best possible situation you could have, right? To bring in a guy who has not just some experience, but a ton of experience with your program, with the other receivers in your receiving room, with the offensive line, with the general offensive system, and having worked with Joe Sloan. Now he's heading into year 3 with Joe Sloan. So I think it's just a slam dunk, like that plug in at that quarterback spot, given how and they need a lot of production from that offense, right? And just given some of the questions they still have on defense. So I mean, to have probably the best possible scenario you could have to replace the Heisman Trophy winner is to bring in a guy like Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, barring some sort of crazy quarterback transfer coming into the school, like if I don't know, for example, like if Jalen Milroe or Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck entered the transfer portal and came to LSU, like that's really the only possible scenario I could have seen them upgrading at that quarterback spot. In maintaining that Heisman sort of level, but like to have Nussmeier, to have his familiarity with the system in-house, and I think all that's really going to help him this year in this offense.
I guess. Thank you. I'll try to do a little better job of directing traffic the rest of the podcast. Didn't let y'all get your words in exactly right without some cues. So we're going to stay with Koki here. Koki, while Reed and I were covering LSU's appearance here at Media Days, you were a few miles away over in Arlington Monday and Tuesday covering Paul Skenes' start for the National League in the All-Star Game. The Tigers' former ace has been one of the big stories of the first half of the Major League season, with his undefeated 6-0 start as a rookie for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he became one of the few rookies ever to get the ball to start an All-Star game. Koki, give us your impressions of how Skenes dealt with all the attention, how much he seemed to be enjoying his first All-Star appearance, and he only pitched the 1 inning as expected, so how do you think he did? And I have to ask, did you get to see his girlfriend at the ballpark, LSU gymnast Olivia Dunn?
I know she was there. I saw her on TV. I didn't actually. My seat was pretty far up there, so I don't think I could really pick her out of the crowd. But
they didn't show her as much as I thought they would. I expected more cutaways to Olivia than they did. There was only a couple.
That's true. I mean, he wasn't on the field as much as, say, Travis Kelce is for Chiefs games, so you don't have as many opportunities to cut back up to the girlfriend, right? So anyway, to get back to Skenes, to me, for the whole 2 days, and that included the media availabilities he had to do on Monday ahead of the home run derby and the red carpet walk with Olivia. Before the All-Star game and the All-Star game itself. And it's just really his entire 2-day stretch with All-Star week and really being on a national stage for the first time in his MLB career. it felt like he was one of them. And what I mean by one of them, I'm talking about Aaron Judge, I'm talking about Juan Soto, I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani, the superstars of the game, the faces of baseball. He has become one of the faces of baseball, and I think that became very clear this weekend. And just as for him, like I think on the surface he was cool, calm, and collected, but on the inside it felt like a guy who was like a kid at a candy shop, like as someone who was really enjoying having the opportunity to be an all-star this early in his career, and getting to pitch on the stage on national TV. I just feel like that he was really relishing the moment, and how could you not, right? Especially given how quickly his ascension has been. 13 months ago he was pitching for LSU. We were talking about him as one of the best pitchers in LSU history, and his ascension was already. And before that, the 13 months before that, he was just a pitcher at Air Force, a pitcher and a catcher at Air Force. So just imagine how much his life has changed over the last year or two. And when you put that into perspective, you really sort of appreciate what he's done so far. And when it came to what he did on the field, he was really good. I mean, Stephen Kwan's one of the better leadoff hitters in all of Major League Baseball, and he was able to get him out. He was able to get Gunnar Henderson hit a little tapper back to him. Henderson, that guy's probably going to finish top 5 in the MVP voting in the AL. And then it was the headliners, right? It was Juan Soto. It was a 7-pitch walk, and then he was able to get Aaron Judge, maybe the best hitter in baseball, to ground out on the first pitch. So it was really fun to get to see him match up against Soto and Judge, especially. And it was just a very, very interesting and unique weekend for him, especially.
Koki, as we were recording this, the players are heading back to their respective teams. The second half of the season resumes on Friday. Tell me, what do you think now? The big question is, how will Skenes do? Can he continue to pitch at such a high level as teams perhaps adjust to him now that they've seen him a time or two?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be an adjustment. And I think hitters are going to get on to him a little bit more in the second half of the season. And Christian Yelich talked about this a little bit. Milwaukee Brewers outfielder Christian Yelich talked about this a little bit on Monday. Just the fact that that's Major League Baseball. That's big league ball, right? Like a young stud comes onto the scene. The rest of the league makes an adjustment on him, and then it's up to him to make an adjustment back. And that tug, that push and pull is what makes the game so interesting, and makes the game so unpredictable at times as well. So, but I say that, but at the same time, 100 miles an hour is 100 miles an hour. And that splitter sinker pitch, that splinker at 95, 96 miles an hour, like those are legit pitches. Those are legit elite and major league pitches. And he's going to be hard to hit regardless, as long as he's throwing strikes with those two pitches, and he can mix in the occasional slider, mix in the occasional curveball and the occasional changeup. That slider is also a very good third pitch. So the fact that he has weapons to get left-handers and right-handers out, the fact that he can throw 100 miles an hour in the 7th inning of a start, and the fact that he has that really good splinker, I think that's going to maintain his at least general excellence throughout the second half of the season, as long as he's throwing those pitches for strikes. But whether he's going to have a 1.9 ERA at the end of the season, I'm willing to bet that he won't. But I'd be surprised if it was over 3, for example. And that's pretty crazy, given that he was pitching for LSU 13 months ago.
Back to media days. We obviously LSU is the first day, so that leaves 3 days to look for the interesting stories, the interesting topics. Yesterday was Texas's day here at media days. I wrote a column about their appearance and how the Longhorns come into the league, kind of a little full of themselves. Quinn Ewers, their quarterback, and the athletic director, they've been talking about how they're going to be everybody's Super Bowl, everyone's biggest game of the year. I know Mississippi State plays Texas. LSU doesn't play Texas. They play Oklahoma. Mississippi State plays Texas. I know it'll be big, but I know playing Texas won't be bigger than than the Egg Bowl against Ole Miss. Reed, you tried to get some good answers from Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri coach, about Blake Baker leaving his program to become LSU's defensive coordinator. You also wrote about another coach who's on the hot seat, former UL coach Billy Napier at Florida, who's on 11-14 his first 2 years combined at Florida. I got to say, tell me about your thoughts on those two things. But first, I got to say, I can't remember I've come to a lot of media days. I can't remember them Florida being so under the radar, making such a small splash in media days as they did this year. They're just kind of an afterthought, especially with the two new teams coming into the league, but not talked about with the other potential powers, potential college football playoff teams. Just your thoughts on what we heard from Eli Drinkwitz about Baker and what you heard from Billy Napier.
Well, first of all, on Florida, there were a lot of questions yesterday about Florida's schedule and how difficult it is. We talked about it a little bit last week, and Graham Mertz, the quarterback, was asked about it. Billy Napier was asked about it a few different times in a few different ways, and they said exactly what you'd expect them to say. We take it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity. It's a double-sided coin. To play a tough schedule. It could hurt you, but it could also help you. You pick up a couple, wins as part of that stretch, then maybe you're starting to get more firm inside. Maybe a college football playoff mix. So they said everything you'd sort of expect them to say, but again, it's not going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy at all to win. Just to get to a 500 record this year for Florida. And they've sort of been hovering around 500 the last couple of years. So we'll see what happens with Billy Napier, former UL coach, because of that. And then on the other side, Missouri, we really wanted to talk about just Blake Baker, Kevin Peoples, and Jake Olson, the three coaches that LSU brought over from Missouri in the offseason. And I really asked, the defensive tackle for Missouri, his name's Christian Williams, just what his relationship was like with Blake Baker, how he sort of ran the defense, what he sort of made that defense in an identity. Well, what did he sort of turn that defense into? And he said, the main thing with Blake Baker is that he's a relationships coach. He really starts with getting good relationships with his players, forming those bonds, forming those connections, and then from there, taking that and putting it out on the football field and then trying to communicate and trying to get everyone on the same page. And if you listen to Brian Kelly, that's one thing he said all throughout last year and a little bit in the offseason. This time he said, we struggled to communicate on defense last year. And so in hiring a defensive coordinator, he really needed to find somebody who could connect with his players and who could communicate with them and solve some of those problems that plagued them last year. And I think based on Blake Baker's track record, based on what his former players have said about him, it seems like he can sort of be the kind of coach to take over in that regard and to leave his mark that way and sort of fulfill that role that Brian Kelly envisioned for him.
Yeah, it seems to me like there was a little too much going on with Matt House when he was defensive coordinator. He came from the Kansas City Chiefs. It seems the assignments, the adjustments were a little too complicated for the LSU players to do well with. It seems like maybe we'll see how it turns out, obviously, but it seems like what they needed need is someone who's more of a college coach, a guy who can kind of just kind of reduce things to more simple, reactive strategies that are going to help them, sometimes it is just see ball, get ball. And I think that's something that LSU liked the last couple of years. Reed, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I want to ask you, based on Florida's tough schedule and his record so far, will Billy Napier still be the coach for Florida when LSU goes to Gainesville for their game on November 16th?
Let's see, November 16th. So it's kind of late in the season. I'll say yes. I don't really see them. Billy Napier's in his third year. I think it would take a lot for them to make such a drastic move mid-season. Third year of a coach. I know y'all might disagree with me on that, but I think it would take a lot. Yeah, I see you. I think it would take a lot. So I'll say that he will be coaching for that game, but I don't feel great about it. Maybe Koki, you can disagree with me there.
Yeah, I'm going to respectfully counter that, and I think there's a pretty good chance that he's not the coach by November 16th. And what are we talking? Oh, that's like week 9, week 10 ish, right? And I mean, by that point, they would have already played at least 6 or 7 teams that are either top 25 teams or very close to being top 25 teams. And I can make the argument that they're all more talented than Florida. I mean, they're starting the year with Miami. That's probably a loss if Miami is plays up to their talent. UCF is one of the more underrated teams in the Big 12 this year. They're going to have a really good offense. I think they could very easily lose that game. And then that's even before you get into the gauntlet of the fact that they play almost every other good team in the SEC this season. So I worry a lot for Billy Napier heading into the season. And I think it's nice that he's getting Graham Mertz back at quarterback. And I think they probably have at least a middle of the pack SEC quarterback, a guy who kind of surprised me with how efficient he was last season. But at the same time, outside of that, I mean, they lost some pieces of the transfer portal. They didn't really reload to the level that I would have loved to see them reload at. And I think they've had some decent recruiting classes, but this buildup for them has just simply been too slow. And in the era of the transfer portal, where you can really put together your roster and create a contender really quickly, especially when you're at a place like Florida. That is the pedigree of a place like Florida. Like, there isn't much of an excuse to not be at least a 9 or 10 win team at this point, and if they don't get there and they're, say they're projected to have less than 8 wins, then I can't see why you would keep them, honestly. So, just given the expectations of Florida, and again, it's Florida. This is a giant national brand and one of the biggest college football brands in the country. I don't know. I just feel like the expectations are going to eat him alive, and he just hasn't built this roster quick enough, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, in Florida's 9 games before the LSU game, they play Miami, Texas A&M, at Tennessee, Kentucky, not an easy out, Georgia, of course, at Texas. I'm going to say thumbs down on Billy Napier being the coach against LSU on November 16th. I think I'll have an interim coach in place for that game. Koki, I thought we had the most interesting moment of the entire media days on Wednesday morning when Alabama's new coach, Kalen DeBoer, was at the podium in the main press room, and the legend he replaced, Nick Saban, is sitting back there on the SEC network set in the back of the room where he's now an analyst for ESPN. And DeBoer was asked, right, did anyone try to talk you out of what to me looks like the impossible task of following Saban, trying to live up to the enormous expectations at Alabama, where Nick only won 6 national championships, right? Just an incredible amount of success. And they say you don't want to be the man following the man, but he just chose to take that job. What did you think of DeBoer's answers, his appearance, and how do you think he'll do this year at Tuscaloosa and in the years to come?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting because when you just look at this roster from like a pure roster construction standpoint, they haven't lost a whole ton just in terms of pure talent from last season's team. And you just look at that and combined with the recruiting classes, you'd say, oh, like Alabama's going to be Alabama again this year. But the thing that's always separated Alabama from everybody else isn't necessarily the talent. There's been a lot of teams that have had the talent, right? Like we've looked at all these Texas A&M rosters. We've seen, Ohio State, right? Like teams that are consistently in the top of the recruiting rankings every year and getting big name transfers, Georgia, obviously. So, but the thing that's always separated Alabama from all those other teams is Nick Saban. And now they don't have Nick Saban. And it's going to be just very fascinating to see how quickly they can hit the ground running with Kalen DeBoer. And what is Alabama's patience? What is the fan base's patience with DeBoer if they only win 9 games this year, for example? I'm not talking about, getting over 500. They're going to get over 500, right? They're going to have a better record than this is different than the Billy Napier situation at Florida. If they're great again, they go, 11-1 or whatever. That would be fine, right? They'll make the playoff, and I think most Alabama fans would be pretty satisfied with that, especially given the fact that, again, it's DeBoer's first season. But if they're an 8 or 9 win team, which is possible, if a couple things don't go right and the coaching isn't at the same level as it once was, which naturally is something that wouldn't surprise anyone because they don't have Nick Saban anymore. I'm really curious to see, like, when does the pressure cooker start? Right then, right? And I mean, all due respect to Kalen DeBoer, I think he was a very good hire. I think he was the best that Alabama probably could have done in that situation. But at the same time, he's not Nick Saban, and Alabama is not Washington, or it's not Fresno State, and it's not Sioux Falls. So it's just a very big responsibility that he's going to have. And I think it was a very interesting dynamic yesterday during SEC Media Days, where you literally had Nick Saban in the back of the room watching his press conference in his first ever SEC Media Day.
He's literally the presence in, DeBoer could see him while he was talking to us, answering questions.
The shadow was literally in the room. And I sort of wrote about how that interaction in the room was so unique and interesting yesterday. So I'm just very curious to see how this sort of all turns out for Alabama heading into this season.
Well, guys, it's getting time where we need to head back to the main room in a few minutes for the last two teams of Media Days, Auburn and Kentucky. Then it'll be time to head back to Baton Rouge. Before we go, I want to remind people, Friday, the SEC preseason media poll and the preseason All-SEC team, as voted on by people covering Media Days, will be announced. I won't ask both of you how you voted unless you want to tell me, but I will ask you both, where do you think LSU will be ranked in the preseason poll among the 16 teams, and which Tigers do you think will be first team All-SEC? Reed, you want to start with that?
Yes, I'll start. I'll say top 6, comfortably in the top 6 for LSU. I could see anywhere probably from 4 to 6 range. I think that's probably where they'll slide in. That's pretty much consensus. Your top tier teams going to be Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, I'd assume. So LSU is really going to be grappling, I think, with Missouri, maybe Tennessee, the sort of second-tier teams. As far as players on the All-SEC teams, obviously Will Campbell and Emory Jones, the two tackles. Will Campbell's probably going to be on the first team. I'd say they both have a shot at getting on the first team, but maybe one's on the first, one's on the second. Harold Perkins is probably going to be on the first team as one of his linebackers. And that's probably the 3 that I came up with. I think Xavier Thomas, the transfer receiver from Mississippi State, he's got a shot at being on one of the teams as a special teamer, as a return specialist. But other than that, those 3 are the main names that LSU fans should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Reed here. I think Will Campbell's pretty much a lock for the first team. I think Emory Jones is going to make either the first team or the second team, probably the second team, just given the addition of Kelvin Banks to the conference from Texas, and the fact that it's either going to be him or Campbell that are going to be the number 1 overall pick, or at least the first tackle pick in next year's draft. And then on defense, I think Harold Perkins will make the team. But I don't really see anyone else being a real contender there. I think Reed makes a very good point that Xavier Thomas could make it as a special teamer. As for LSU as a team, where they're going to finish, I think anywhere between 4 and 6. I think that's a good call. I lean toward closer to 5 or 6 than to 4. I think people are going to be a little bit skeptical about what this offense is going to look like after you lose, 3 first-round picks. Even though I think a lot of people believe that this offensive line may be the best in the SEC. Then defensively, I think people are going to have some questions about, like how much better, if at all, will they be from last season's team, given the fact that they don't have a ton of new faces on that defense, and that Harold Perkins is going to be moving back to that inside linebacker spot. So I think it's probably going to be closer to 5 or 6, but if they finish in 4th, it wouldn't shock me either.
Yeah, I think so too. I think 4th would be the ceiling for LSU to be picked. I think 5 or 6. I think that means they're going to be ranked. I think that means they're going to be a team that people think can make the college football playoff. That's pretty respectable in this league, because you figure the SEC is going to get 4 to 6 teams into the playoff. Probably 4. 6 could be a lot out of 12, but they're going to be in that mix. And I think that and I look at this team, and I don't think they're going undefeated, but I think they can certainly win any game on their schedule. I think there'll be a loss or 2 they can absorb. It's again, it makes that season opener against USC that much bigger. You need to get off to a good start, because you need to have a little room for error in the middle of a tough conference slate. I know for a lot of you LSU fans, that opener against USC in Las Vegas still seems a long way off, but for us, football season has begun. And the Tigers are opening preseason practice later this month, right, Reed? Before the end of July, right?
Yes, end of July, early August. That's when they start practicing.
Right.
So it's coming quick. We got a couple weeks. Rab's going to be in Paris for those couple weeks, so he's going to be gone for a little bit. But yeah,
I'm sad I won't be there to be sweating at 2 a days. Yeah, we're not on 2 days anymore, but at practice, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not jealous of you at all. No, I'm not jealous. But yeah, it's gonna get started real quick. It's right around the corner. Exciting times. We just got to get through the next month and a half, and then football season will really be here.
Well, there's going to be a lot to cover, and our coverage is going to start building up of LSU football in the weeks leading up to that season opener with Southern California. And I'm a little biased, but I think you can find the best coverage of LSU football in all LSU sports in the pages of The Advocate, the Times-Picayune, at theadvocate.com and NOLA.com. Reed mentioned it. I'm leaving next week to go cover the Olympics. This will be my last LSU podcast for a while. I'm going to cover the Olympic Games. There's 35 Louisiana and LSU athletes in the game. So we got there's a lot of big names like Mondo Duplantis and Sha'Carri Richardson, Leah Finnegan, the gymnast, the Pelicans point guard Jose Alvarado is going to be playing with Tremont Waters from LSU from Puerto Rico. So a lot of names to cover. I hope you follow that coverage as well. But we're still going to have all your bases covered with LSU football, LSU baseball, basketball, and the other sports. Please follow my coverage from Paris and follow the coverage that we're going to have back here. Koki has got a personal trip to Japan. I'm a little envious of that. That sounds pretty exciting too. Koki, I hope you have a great time in Japan.
Yeah, just trying to sneak in a nice little vacation.
Very nice.
Before we get camp started. So haven't been back in a while, so it'll be good to head back.
A well deserved vacation. You've been working really hard. Jumping straight from baseball to football. You've been working really hard.
Oh yeah. It's a lot. I did it 1 year. It was a grind. It was a grind. Well, guys, thank you again for being with us today, and thank you to Jim Darcey for coordinating this for us. We're good at the words. We're not the three of us are not the best at producing the whole video thing. So we appreciate your help today. And so for now, this is Scott Rabalais speaking for Koki Riley and for Reed Darcey and for Jim Darcey, saying thank you for joining us on the LSU Sports Insider. So long from Dallas.